something I wanted to beat everybody else to the punch in regards to my expert analysis of it was this new finding about Neanderthals. I came across an article from theconversation.com where they have a headline that says Neanderthals died out 40,000 years ago, but there's never been more of their DNA on Earth. So Neanderthals died out 40,000 years ago, but there's never been more of their DNA on Earth. As soon as I saw this, I started reading it, and of course I knew what they were trying to say. They were saying more or less that Neanderthals had interbred with what we would call modern day humans, so to speak, and ultimately that resulted in hybrids. Or I might not be wording it exactly right, but whatever was contemporary to their time according to popular scientific thought. And thus their DNA is more populous now than what it was back in their day. Well, my expert analysis and unfortunately Answers in Genesis, probably ICR and other creationist organizations have beaten me to the punch, not in terms of that they were quicker to analyzing it than what I was. They may have been, they probably were, but last week I fully intended to talk about this topic as soon as I saw this article from The Conversation saying they died out 40,000 years ago, but there's never been more of their DNA on Earth today. My proposal is that Neanderthals were nothing less and nothing more than humans. That's right, Neanderthals are humans. In fact, it's incredible what we have done to the Neanderthal. We have mythologized what the Neanderthal actually was. In fact, when they were first discovered, one of the people that found the skeletons and put it together actually manipulated it so it was hunched over and looked more ape-like, actually in a very unnatural pose for the structure of its bones, to the degree that if this person actually stood the way that they positioned the skeleton, they would have been in agonizing pain and practically paralyzed. So I wanted to get that out there, that Neanderthals are humans. There's so much evidence that shows that they were just as intelligent as we are. They were just as advanced as we are. Neanderthals were humans. They weren't some sort of subspecies or anything like that. They indeed are humans, perhaps with slight genetic variants. And I'm not going to get too far into that because I have to introduce the show for today. This is the Bill Seng Podcast. My name is Bill Seng. Now that I got that out there, I can rest easy tonight. So thank you so much for joining me for today's program. Don't forget to get onto Rumble and YouTube and Buzzsprout and subscribe. For Rumble and YouTube, our goal is to hit 1,000 subscribers. So please, as soon as you turn this on, also hit the like, share, subscribe, bell button, whatever it is on YouTube and Rumble so that we can tally up those likes, tally up those subscriptions, because we want this to be able to show up in people's feeds so that this program can continue to grow, become more popular, and spread the truth of the gospel, spread the truth of the Christian worldview even. We're not talking about some sort of fairy tale dreamland that we're trying to promote. We're trying to promote the truth. We're trying to promote a worldview that actually does make sense out of reality, and that can only be known through our understanding of the Bible and in the person of Jesus Christ, ultimately pointing us to God the Father and the Holy Spirit as well. So thank you so much for joining me today, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel wherever it is you are listening to it. I'd like to thank you so much for joining me today. The main topic for today is going to be that on immigration. This is a topic that lots of Christians are confused on, and I don't fault them. I am sympathetic towards those who are confused on it because our heart goes out to those who have fled their homeland in order to find refuge in the United States of America. After all, the United States of America is the greatest country on the face of the planet, the greatest nation. Regardless of who occupies the White House, we still enjoy more freedom, more guaranteed rights than any other country on the face of the planet. And I can fully understand why people would like to flee where they live, in places like Mexico and Venezuela and Cuba, in order to live in the United States of America. Of course, in the United States of America, we probably don't have the health care benefits that Cuba has. So I guess they're losing out by running away here. By the way, I'm being a little bit sarcastic there because regardless, contrary to popular belief, the American healthcare system is far superior to that of Cuba. So, immigration is going to be our main topic, but I got a couple of side topics I want to discuss first, just to get us warmed up, to get us up to date on what's happening inside of the world, things that should be important to each and every one of us. One of these things would be that of Disney. We've been talking a fair amount about Disney lately, and don't know if you're aware, Disney continues to bleed money. They are continuing to bleed money, and one of the things they're attributing this to now is the price hikes at their theme parks. Their prices now are just ridiculous in regards to individual tickets to their theme parks, and so tourism is down. Not many people wanting to take their whole families, take a family of 4, 5, 6 people to Disney and just having to spend $500 to spend a day there. Not so willing to do that. But I suspect there's probably more to it than just the price hikes at the theme parks. There's been a lot of backlash against Disney ever since the disclosure of their not-so-secret gay agenda, which they have revealed not too long ago. You remember that video, right, where that executive, or whatever she was, I think it was a marketing exec of some sort from Disney, was not caught on video. She recorded it willfully because of the quote-unquote "Don't Say Gay" bill in Florida, where she said that she's proud of her not-so-secret gay agenda and how Disney didn't even try to silence or to try to discourage her from promoting it, and how they would just put this stuff inside of all their shows here and there in small little tidbits so that children can see and be manipulated by its content to embrace and maybe even join this LGBTQ plus agenda. So right after all that, Disney immediately saw some backlash. People stopped going to their theme parks. People canceled Disney Plus. A lot of backlash on that. And you would think that Disney would have learned their lesson by now, but they've gone even further. We're not even talking LGBTQ plus type of stuff right now, but if it wasn't clear to you as a Christian that Disney hates you, this will make it all the more clear. Well, first of all, I want to point out that if you are unaware, Disney tried to kill The Chosen. Let me say that again. Disney tried to kill The Chosen. And maybe not The Chosen directly, but Angel Studios. If you go to the Babylon Bee, they have an interview with the creators of Angel Studios, and they detail the story of how Disney very clearly tried to destroy their studio. It's a remarkable story. And when I heard it, I was totally convinced that Disney is not indifferent toward Christians. They do not like Christians. They don't like Christian values. They don't like people who are Christian. They don't like the message of the gospel. They don't like any of that stuff. And they're not going to promote it, and they are not going to promote values that are similar to those of Christians. And as further proof to that, FX, which is owned by Disney, has now produced a show called Little Demon. And this show, get this, is about the Antichrist. And it is a cartoon show. I don't know that it's necessarily geared toward children. I doubt it. It's probably geared toward adults. No doubt children will see it. The style is very similar to that of which children's shows are these days. And it is about this teenage girl who finds out that she is the Antichrist and that her father is thus the devil. And I find it really funny. I kind of see it as the ultimate act of feminism. What feminist stepped up to the plate and said, "Why does the Antichrist have to be a man?" That was quite a manly voice for a feminist, but they're a guy feminist too, I suppose. What feminist stepped up to the plate and said, "Why does the Antichrist have to be a man? Let's make it a teenage girl"? just blows my mind that Disney would go that far as to make a show about the Antichrist. I mean, and actually using the term Antichrist inside of their show and then put it out there for the public to be able to view. So there you go. Proof all the more that Disney is, I'll go ahead and say it, anti-Christian. So we breezed pretty quickly through that topic right there of Neanderthals and Disney. I'm going to kind of wet your palate a little bit regarding immigration. Recently, Ron DeSantis, Greg Abbott have sent illegal immigrants from their states to places like Martha's Vineyard and to Chicago and I can't remember where else off the top of my head. But they're sending them out to these places that are sanctuary cities. They claim that they love illegal immigrants, that they want illegal immigrants. And so these conservative governors said, okay, you want illegal immigrants? Our illegal immigration problem is far beyond our ability to control it. So since you love them so much, we are going to send them your way. So if I'm not mistaken, to Martha's Vineyard, Ron DeSantis sent 50 to 100 illegal immigrants, and they weren't too happy about that. In fact, Gavin Newsom, and I got a new name for Gavin Newsom, Gavin Lockdown Newsom. Gavin Lockdown Newsom. Gavin Lockdown Newsom. Why do I call him Gavin Lockdown Newsom now? Well, because he locked his state down during the COVID and all that, had some of the strictest rules regarding the lockdowns in California when it came to COVID. He shut down all sorts of churches, sent pastors to jail for defying his orders to stay at home on Sundays and not to meet with their congregations, which, by the way, great shout out to John MacArthur for not complying, for doing the whole 2 weeks thing, I think it was. And then he said, hey, I got people I got to be visiting. I got people I got to be praying for. I got people I got to be meeting with. I can't comply to this anymore because I'm a Christian. Death is not something that is a concern of mine. I'm going to do what I have to do to minister to my people, and this COVID thing is not going to stop me from doing that. And so they continue to meet at church, and they tried to stop them from meeting at church, but they prevailed. So good job, John MacArthur. God bless you and your church. And as to Gavin Lockdown Newsom, he was a total hypocrite in telling people they couldn't go out to dinner, they couldn't go out to parties, and yet he was caught all over the place going out to parties and going out to dinners, despite the fact that he was saying it was too dangerous for everybody else to do these things. So why does he do this? Because he's a progressive liberal Democrat. That's why he's allowed to do these things. He's better than us. And so I think that speaks for itself right there. So I'm being a little bit facetious. I can't say that word very well. I'm being a little bit sarcastic when I say that. So understand that. But he called for an investigation into Ron DeSantis, who specifically sent illegal immigrants into Martha's Vineyard. Again, like I said, it's about 50 to 100 illegal immigrants he sent out there. And I just find this incredibly hypocritical on his part, as he did all these things with the lockdowns where he didn't want people traveling because he was afraid of COVID. And yet he's wanting to embrace these people crossing the border that we do not know their medical history, their medical condition, whether they've contracted COVID, whether they have COVID, whether they're spreading COVID, or any other diseases that might be a threat to the United States of America. And yet he says that he wants them for himself. He does not want them to be sent to these sanctuary cities, which is what they are for. And he is calling Ron DeSantis' move cruel. Now, if you're an illegal immigrant, where would you rather be? Some place in Texas where it's practically a war zone because of illegal immigration? Or Martha's Vineyard, where the people are nice? It's a beautiful environment. There's beautiful and good restaurants out there. Where would you rather be, and who is more equipped? This state that is having an illegal immigration problem where they have thousands, maybe millions of illegal immigrants populating their streets and buildings, where it is just a problem? Or would you rather be this place where there's none of that stuff going on so that you can just live life the way that anybody else would live their lives. Now, again, that wasn't the point of Ron DeSantis' move. Ron DeSantis' move to send these illegal immigrants was specifically to prove that these Democrats that claim to be sympathetic toward illegal immigrants are lying. They really just want them in conservative states, populating conservative areas like Texas. They want to flip Texas. And how does that relate to illegal immigration? I mean, after all, illegal immigrants cannot vote, or can they? I'm not going to get into that aspect of it right now, but listen up. They for quite a while have wanted to pass what they call immigration reform. And they make it sound like this new idea, this immigration reform bill. And yet, you might not know this, but in 1986, there was an immigration reform bill that was passed by none other than Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan happened to pass a reform act. It was called the, let me get this name right here. I believe it was just called the Immigration Reform Act. And what it did is it granted amnesty to 3 million illegal immigrants. Okay, 3 million illegal immigrants, not too big of a deal, right? Well, Ronald Reagan, if you recall, he won the state of California twice. Both the times he ran for president. And if you're unfamiliar, Ronald Reagan is a Republican. How many Republican presidential candidates have won California since Ronald Reagan? 0. Not a single one of them has even come close. What happened? Well, the Democrats pushed for this Immigration Reform Act, and Ronald Reagan, he signed off on it. Now, the other part of that was they were supposed to build a wall on the southern border as well. That never happened, but they granted the amnesty to these 3 million illegal immigrants, and all of a sudden, magically, overnight, California became a blue state. Clearly, there's a political agenda attached to that, and I think that it even gets slimier than that when you get into the technical details of exactly what happened. Did California really have 3 million illegal immigrants after having a Republican president sign an immigration reform bill that all of a sudden decided that they were Democrats? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it does when you really get into the weeds, which I am not going to do right now because I like having my show on YouTube, on Rumble, and on Facebook, and these other platforms. So I'm not going to go any further than that. So, having said that, I'd like to point out that I am sympathetic. If you are a Christian that believes we should grant amnesty to illegal immigrants, I hear you. I think that they are in a bad position. They're crossing the border from places like Mexico, and like I said, Cuba and Venezuela, and lots of these south of the border countries that aren't so great, where people don't want to live. And they come here to the United States looking for a better life, and they find themselves so far back on the waiting list that it's just not going to happen. There's many people trying to do it the right way that are having to wait years and years and years to make it over. In fact, I'll say that Donald Trump actually had a great immigration reform idea, and that was to make it a merit-based immigration system. Meaning that if you are able to add to the American culture, if you are able to contribute as somebody that is a skilled worker, we want you. And it'll get you over here faster. And it would incentivize people to pick up these skills in order to make it to the United States. That's another topic right there. But again, I am sympathetic to the idea that we want to have these people who are oppressed to be safe in the United States, right? But there are some problems. Well, first of all, let me point this out. Biblically speaking, what does the Bible have to say about how we treat foreigners? Well, in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, let me make sure I'm reading the right verse here. Chapter 19 verses 33 and 34 says, "The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself," and so forth. Okay, so that sounds pretty clear. So we should make these people citizens, right? Ooh, not quite. That's not what this verse is saying. What this verse is actually saying here is that, yes, we should treat the alien among us as citizens. We should treat them with courtesy, love, respect, all the kindness that we would show to our neighbor who is a common citizen as well. Likewise, it is saying that they shall obey the law of the land. And this is where it gets interesting, because a lot of the people crossing the border, they're still waving the flag of Mexico. Well, why is it they leave Mexico to come to the United States and still wave the flag of Mexico? We'll get into that here in a minute. What I want to point out is to be sympathetic to illegal immigration is not really compassion. You have compassion, I'm sure, those of you who really believe that this is helping them, but it is not. And you must understand, illegal immigration does not help illegal immigrants. It harms them. The reason that is because in order to get to the United States, they oftentimes have to go through somebody who is known as a coyote. And lots of times that means they have to carry drugs or other illegal goods into the country in order to secure their passage. Not only that, there is sex trafficking that goes on. There's drug trafficking that goes on. And these people are exploited. Remember, we're talking about people who don't necessarily speak English. And so the people that they are in community with are also people, lots of times they are in league with these drug lords and sex traffickers and all that. And so they continue to exploit these very people who cross the border for the rest of their lives, oftentimes even exploiting their families. Not only is it sex trafficking, drugs, and so forth, but also, as I implied, gangs. So and not only that, but people can join gangs, because who do you look to for help when you're in trouble as an illegal immigrant? Do you go to the authorities? Well, no. You need another form of protection, and gangs are the way to go. And lots of gang members, if you've heard of MS-13, I always get it confused. El Salvador or San Salvador. I can't remember which one's the capital and which one is the country. I think El Salvador is the country, but it's a Salvadorian gang, if I'm not mistaken. But I believe it actually originated in the United States, moved to El Salvador, and it keeps a sort of grounding inside the United States nonetheless. It's a very brutal gang, by the way. They carry around machetes, chop people up. They're absolutely terrible. Donald Trump was right for calling them animals. I believe they are created in the image of God, mind you. But the types of acts that they do are absolutely savage, and they should be they should pay the legal consequences for what it is that they do. Even more, right now, there are politicians, and I heard this all through the early 2000s up until, I know that John McCain was big on this as well. John McCain, by the way, was a Republican, the Maverick, as they called him. They were really big on saying that, well, the reason why we need these illegal immigrants is because they'll do the jobs that American citizens do not want to do, and they'll do it for cheaper. What do they mean? They mean that they can get illegal immigrants to work for them for less than minimum wage. Wait a second here. If you want people to work for less than minimum wage, well, maybe we should just get rid of minimum wage. But instead, what they're doing is there's these politicians and rich people, and I'm not bashing rich people or even necessarily politicians, but these rich people and politicians that support illegal immigration and think that we should be allowed to employ illegal immigrants for less than minimum wage, what are they doing? They're essentially enslaving these illegal immigrants. And I have known illegal immigrants, by the way, that are oppressed through this system where they are forever. Their lives are nothing but work and work and work, traveling to and from work just to make enough money to be able to survive. And yet they find that more worthwhile for them than to go back to their home countries. So you have to understand here, they're not in a good situation even after they cross the border. They prefer that to having to fear for their lives. Nonetheless, it's still not what I would call the American dream for them. Some of them get to experience that in an absolute sense, but it becomes very, very difficult for them. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything here. Certain things I don't necessarily want to talk about, like the whole thing with voting and how they're oppressed in that regard, how they are forced to vote certain ways. But you didn't hear that here, and I'm not going to talk about that, so don't worry about that one. But what I really want to talk about then was the Bible in relation to illegal immigration. I haven't pulled like a bunch of verses or whatever. I mentioned to you Leviticus 19. But what I also want to emphasize in relation to the Old Testament law is that the alien that lived among the nation of Israel were expected to live by the laws of Israel. They were not above the law. They were to become as citizens of Israel. And by the way, they did not have a democratic system in place, or what we would call Israel was not a republic. It ultimately was, I don't know, would you call it a monarchy, perhaps? But in its early days, it was more of a theocracy when Moses was in charge, ruled over by judges before they had a king, and thus there wasn't a whole lot of political incentive to have foreigners come into their camp. But when the foreigners did come into their camp, they were to identify with the law of the land of the nation of Israel. They weren't supposed to bring their idols. They weren't supposed to do things that in the eyes of God and the nation of Israel would be debaucherous, would be abominable, anything like that. They were supposed to become as one of them. That's not what we see from lots of the illegal immigrants coming over from other countries in the United States of America. In fact, we oftentimes even give them passes when it comes to laws. You and I, when we are stopped for a routine traffic violation, like speeding, we're required to hand over our license and registration, and we're oftentimes given a ticket or a citation. Not so with people that are suspected to be illegal immigrants. Instead, they are allowed to go. And not only that, we also see that within, I don't know to what degree, I think that it's catch and release, where they're immediately released back into the public, even if they have committed crimes. And we've seen instances where there are repeat offenders that just commit worse and worse acts of crime and violence against people. Even illegal immigrants who were convicted of harming people, who get released and get released and do just horrendous acts to innocent citizens of the United States of America. Once again, that's not saying all of them. That's saying that there are why add to the problem that we already have in the United States? The average person, and don't take this the wrong way, is bad enough. And so we are always going to have crime among us. No matter whether there's illegal immigrants in our country or not, there's always going to be crime. Why do we add it? By adding people that are undocumented to our system, so we cannot track them, so we don't know who they are, so we don't know where they live, or anything like that, where it makes law enforcement, the job of law enforcement, all the more difficult to be able to fix that problem. My opinion, it's needless. I know that when Donald Trump suggested that we build a border wall, which, by the way, a border wall is something that would be a very benign sort of way of handling the illegal immigration problem, there's a lot of backlash from people saying that, well, we should build bridges, not walls, and that we should be welcoming them, or that a wall gives the wrong sort of message to us. The funny thing is, for those of us that are Christians, and by the way, Christians, read your Bibles. Please, 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 please read your Bibles. It is embarrassing how many Christians do not read their Bibles and do not know what it says. Our country would be in a much better state if Christians read their Bibles and understood what it said, we would be right on most of the issues, all the issues if we read it and understand it perfectly. But let's at least say most of the issues that matter, we would be right on those if we just read and understood what the Bible. And even if you are a secularist, even if you're an atheist, I think that if you read the Bible and at least saw the morality being promoted, even if you don't accept the God of the Bible, the morality and the law presented inside of it is good. And even if you don't like the prescriptions for law breaking, you can at least appreciate the morality that is promoted inside of it. But there's an entire book in the Bible dedicated to the building of a wall around Jerusalem. What's that all about? It is because they wanted to protect themselves. Nehemiah, particularly, and by the way, the name of the book is the Book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah wanted to build a wall around Jerusalem because he was grieved that Jerusalem was vulnerable to foreign attack, to foreign enemies, and to invasion. And so he, with the blessing of the king, was allowed to rebuild the wall that had been destroyed around Jerusalem. And it is a remarkable story. And he faces much opposition regarding its rebuilding. And it's because certain individuals did not want Jerusalem to be protected. That's the reason behind not having a wall, is so that you don't have protection. And not only that, this might be an extrapolation right here. When you look at New Jerusalem, when you look at God's heavenly kingdom, it's portrayed with a wall around it. Now, in an ultimate sense, the gates will be open once evil is destroyed, but it's always portrayed as having a wall around it. The Bible even gives us the dimensions of that wall. It's absolutely incredible to read that God's heavenly kingdom has a wall. And that is because there are, in that sense, there are citizens of heaven and there are those who are not citizens of heaven, those who belong inside of its walls and those who do not. And again, in the ultimate sense, that's a little bit deeper topic right there. And I don't have the time to really talk about all that right now. But we have to understand that in order for a nation to exist, it needs to have its boundaries. It needs to have its laws. It needs to be able to determine who belongs inside of that country and who loves their country versus those who are foreign invaders. And I fear that that is what we have done, is we allowed many foreign invaders inside of our country to transform our culture and to harm people. And it is frightening in the political sense of how that is being done. In a spiritual sense, no, I'm not frightened, because we know that, once again, as I've said before, God is still on the throne. General rule regarding immigrants, illegal immigration, and how the Christian attitude should be towards them. And it is very similar to the law, so to speak, that we have on hate the sin, love the sinner. And this is how I put it. Love the illegal immigrant. Hate illegal immigration. We should oppose illegal immigration at every checkpoint. But when we find ourselves among those who we suspect have come here illegally, well, I don't think that we should necessarily be, as was coined during the COVID lockdowns, as these Karens who are reporting them and saying, unless you find them to be possibly dangerous, we shouldn't be these Karens who are just trying to harm people for harm's sake, but rather we should love them, embrace them, do the best we can to treat them as Christians would treat one another. Treat them the way as you would want to be treated. Just as the Bible says, after all, they're created in the image of God. Nonetheless, the Bible also teaches us that we need to respect our authorities, and to illegally immigrate into a land is not respecting the authority of the governing bodies of that land. In the United States, that's ultimately the citizens in the United States who are the true government of the United States of America. And thus, I think that maybe certain things inside of our immigration system can be fixed, but there's a lot of things that are good about it and just need to be enforced. And that is the true fix to the immigration system, is first enforce the laws that are on the books. If we did that, majority of our immigration system would be cleaned up, majority of our problems would be cleaned up, and we would be able to decide whether further measures need to be taken. Once again, I was a big fan of Donald Trump's merit-based immigration system, and I think that that would only make America all the greater by allowing the best and brightest to come over here. That's what we want after all. And on top of that, we want people that love and embrace American values. And what is American values? Freedom. Freedom is the culture of America, and we want as many people to be able to enjoy that as possible. So, once again, my name is Bill Seng. This is the Bill Seng Podcast. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. Again, I'm so encouraged to see our numbers go up and up and up as far as subscriptions, as far as views. Continue to subscribe to this. Once again, I made it clear in another episode that you have no choice but to subscribe anymore, but I'm just joking about that. Continue watching. I want you to subscribe. That makes life easier for everybody who's working on that show, which is essentially my wife and I right now. So that'd be wonderful if you can go ahead and subscribe to this. It is a lot of fun being able to make these videos, to be able to do this podcast, and we want to reach as many people as possible. And so not only subscribe to the channels, also share it with your friends, and especially this one. I mean, I think this is such an important topic, and my heart goes out to those who are genuinely seeking refuge from their home country and see the United States of America as a great place to live and a place that might be able to provide them with the protection and freedom that they need and want. So thank you once again. This is the Bill Seng Podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.